Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for Nerds by Nerds, and today I got Josiah in the house, the Dungeon Dad, and we're going to be talking about D&D. Feel free to ask questions. You know, you do a bunch of different videos over there. I think you got some class videos, some DM tips. You do your Monster a Week segment, so you got a bunch of stuff going on. And you said
Yeah,
you just crossed the year mark.
that's correct. Yeah, just at the beginning of January, actually, we had the official second season of Dungeon Dad start as we move into year two.
Nice. So, what was the impetus for you to start YouTubing and creating D&D content?
Well, that's a good question. I guess I had just spent a lot of time watching D&D content, like your guys' channel and like WebDM and all that stuff, and I was constantly getting inspired by that, and I just felt like I had a lot of ideas that I also wanted to share with the world. So, kind of queuing off of what I saw the people doing around me, I wanted to, I guess, add my voice to that. And I think the real thing that kind of kicked it off was Matt Colville's YouTube channel. Just getting involved with that community, especially, and I posted my first video, and the guys from the Matt Colville subreddit all came over to check it out, and they were super enthusiastic and like, oh man, keep doing this, like get better, improve. And now when I look at that first video that I posted, which was a Monster of the Week about the Destrachan from 3.5, it makes me cringe because I'm like, oh man, that was so bad. But the fact that they gave me that encouragement was just fantastic, and it's been a full year, and I guess that's kind of where we're at now.
It's just one of those things. You just got to go out there and create videos, and you keep doing it. It gets better and easier.
Sure.
Our first, our early videos were shot on an iPhone, not even a good one. As far as the camera goes and external mic and
Oh yeah.
people just, if this is something you have it in you to do, you just kind of need to get out there and do it.
Well, and that's just it, because a lot of times I will talk to people like in the community on Discord and stuff who are like, oh, if I'm thinking about doing this, what do I need to prepare? And I'm like, man, just go for it. Like, if you have an idea that you think you want to try out, give her. Because the worst thing that can happen is no one watches, and in that case, it doesn't matter. Like, you're doing it for yourself, right? So I think
Yeah.
that's what makes it fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I even hear people like say, "Well, I don't want to cover this topic or I don't want to cover that topic because so and so does that," right?
Yeah,
And
totally.
but everyone has their own opinion and their own voice on it. Oh, and guys, if you got a question, just throw your questions in the chat, put question in front of them. And hey, you might be watching this on Facebook or YouTube or Twitch. So if it looks like you're the only one there and you're asking questions and we don't see them, it's because I'm getting questions from a bunch of different places and I just haven't gotten to yours yet. But welcome everyone. As I said, to reiterate, we're hanging out with Josiah from Dungeon Dad, and we're just going to be talking about some nerdiness in gaming. And so, being the Dungeon Dad, how many kids do you actually have?
Well, in a literal sense, none. But all of my players are my children, as the name kind of came about. That's a question I get asked a lot, actually, and people always ask, "Are you literally a dad?" Because I don't seem to have any children running around in the background of many of my videos. So the answer to that is no. I'm not a biological father. That was a nickname given to me by my players from my first group that I started DMing, because it was a huge group and they were constantly getting rowdy, and I always had to be like, all right guys, pay attention, like stop talking about the new Bioshock or whatever, like we're in combat. And so that was a nickname that they gave to me. And then when I started doing the YouTube channel, and my friends who I talked about were like, you need to make this your name because that is what we know you as. So that's kind of where that came from. Maybe it'll be literal someday, but I haven't thought that far ahead yet.
So, they're like, this guy stole Nate's name. I don't know that Nate is officially claimed Dungeon Dad as his name, so,
Yeah,
so I
that's true.
think
I
you're
guess
good.
WSD 20, he is the literal Dungeon Dad for sure.
Oh, unless they're talking about, okay, because we have a Nate floating around as well.
Oh yeah, that's so true. Of course, yeah, man.
Nate
There's
the
two
Nerdarch.
Nates in the D&D community that
Um,
have actual children, yet neither of them.
I'm sure there's probably way more than that floating around.
Mm-hmm. Hell
So,
yeah.
so how often are you gaming?
Um, Short answer is as much as possible. But the
Fair enough.
actual answer, I run one game that I've been doing for a while now. That's every 2 weeks, every second Saturday. And then there's another game that we run where we kind of switch off between who's DMing that runs every Sunday. So every Sunday and every second Saturday on a good week.
So Zarif Gaming had asked a question: how to go about making a Death Knight template for the Death Knight character for 5e. I think you got it twisted, bud. You got it backwards. The way 5e works is you're going to take a template from another race and put it on the Death Knight. Because if you go to the DMG, I forget what page it's on, they have a list of all of the other races and stuff for doing that. So that's where you would get that from.
Yeah, totally. I would treat that kind of the same way as, like, well, it's like the half dragon template, right? When you look at that monster, it's like if you want to make a half dragon, you do this, and this. So that's definitely the way I would go about doing that for sure.
So they've definitely scaled back the templates in 5e, and I think for good reason, because in third edition it could get a little crazy.
It was crazy. There is a template for every creature that you could possibly think of in 3rd edition, which I guess is kind of the thing I love and hate about 3rd edition is there was the option to do anything. You could think of literally any insane character, and there was mechanically a way to make that happen, but it also made it very cumbersome, I guess, right? Which is not a great thing in game design, but the 3rd edition was what I started out with, so that was kind of my introduction. It was like, okay, first D&D game, you're level 10, pick some prestige classes, here's a million books, and it was kind of a trial by fire situation, but yeah, the customization in 3rd is just insane.
I remember I made this multi-headed, psionic, fiendish wyvern that I was like, this is going to be such a great encounter. And then, like, the bugbear had this cloak that would allow him to, I don't know if it was go ethereal or phase or whatever, I forget the exact terminology, but he just totally, like, aliened out of this thing and destroyed it in one round. I was like, so sad.
That's awesome.
So
and that's the thing, is it was so hard to predict stuff like that, right? Because it was a whole other world. It was a whole other world.
3rd edition was literally the Wild Wild West of D&D, especially with the OGL. And, I think a lot of great lessons were learned from that and have gone forward, because the third-party content we get now is so much better. And the companies that kind of have been able to make it from the transition from 3rd edition all the way to 5th have really gotten better if they've been able to survive that long.
Yeah. No, for sure. We've seen, like, just the amount of community-driven content in 5th edition that is of high quality, where I look at something and I'm like, oh man, I actually really want to use this in my game, is crazy. Because in 3.5, just by its very nature, there would be some good stuff for sure, but it was really hard to find things that I found exciting. But I think it's a combination of the accessibility of 5th edition and the community, just how there's, like, the D&D renaissance everyone always talks about, which is true. It's real. Like, you go to the DM's Guild and you look at the first few things on the front page for 5e, and it's all generally going to be awesome stuff, which is exciting. It's cool.
It is an awesome time to be gaming. So Kyle Ellis has a question. More sub-races or more unique species?
That's a good question, because, I mean, more unique species is always something that I'm excited about, but it's also a lot harder to fit that into books, like, from Wizards' perspective, because then you just end up with the same thing that happened in 3.5, right? Which is when you have a bajillion races. But that said, I'm okay with that, but I can understand why they might not go that path.
So at any time, if you just want to go off on whatever tangent you want to, you can. But before then, I'm just going to ask questions and pull questions from the chat. So we're pretty much open forum here.
Cool.
And we're getting plenty of questions as well.
Yeah, I see that.
So White Jasmine, how do you feel about rolling stats versus standard array? Do you think rolling stats throws off the balance of the game?
I am a big fan of rolling stats, personally.
I have switched to standard array and point buy with 5th edition, and I'm just terrible at rolling dice for the most part. So I just like to put the stats where I want them. But as a GM, I don't really care what the players do. Like, I don't think I don't worry about balance that much. Like, yeah. I will throw tons of really weak monsters at my players, and I don't even care. They're just going to get slaughtered. And I've yet to hear a player complain that monster wasn't tough enough. You know, because when I do that for a while, and then all of a sudden I'm like, now I'm just good. This tonight I'm just gonna f with them and throw really tough monsters one after another at them, and they're like, oh my god, like it ratchets up the tension because it isn't really the norm for them.
Yeah, I think that combination of like encounter balance is important because obviously you want to have like some challenging encounters now and again. But if you have just challenging encounters, then it becomes like a slog. It's like every day they leave the house expecting to get murdered, which is just not what you want most of the time, anyways. But so yeah, I think like those encounters where it's generally easy, I think those have value for sure. And like, yeah, I agree when it comes to balance. Like, I'm not too concerned about balance for the most part. Generally, what I've done is roll stats, and if they roll less than an average of 12, they are allowed to reroll. Because with point buy, you'd be guaranteed at least a couple good stats, so that's generally how it works. And sometimes I ended up with players who just have weaker characters that don't care. They're like, yeah, this is great. I'm going to roll with an intelligence of 6. I'm going to just role play that. It's going to be fine. I'm like, okay, perfect. Like, and yeah, I don't know. But I can totally understand why some people would want to do point buy for sure.
We played the 4th edition rules. Well, it was Gamma World, and it might be like 7th edition by the time that one came out, but it was 4th edition was the system it was kind of built on that we're playing. And they had like weird ways of generating stats. Like you would get a couple, based on your choices, you'd get a couple stats, and then everything else might be random. I played a character with a 5 intelligence, and it was great. It was a blast to play, and you know the party always had to be careful what they would do around that character because he had the mind of a toddler.
Yeah. Well, role-playing low stats can be a lot of fun. Like, I played with a group where one of the players had a dexterity score of, like, 4 or something, and he was just this frail old man, and, like, he played it up so well, it was pretty awesome. And I think he was actually, like, a fighter, too. Like, he was a strength-based fighter who was way past his prime and just refused to give up. It was a lot of fun. And so, yeah, I think there's value in that, absolutely.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun to do it, and it's far easier to play bad stats than it is to play good stats.
That's very true.
You know, the physical stats, they're just going to show up in the game. That's not a big deal. But playing a high wisdom or high charisma or high intelligence is much tougher because I probably don't know anybody in real life that has a 20 intelligence. So
well, that's the thing, right? It's like if you assume 10 is the average person, it's like, I don't know, some of the greatest minds in the world are maybe like a 16 or a 17. Like, yeah, I'm definitely not smart enough to play a min-maxed wizard, so I just generally try to stay away from it.
Well, you know, I definitely do, but you just do the best you can, and hopefully your GM will feed you information to make your character feel smarter.
And that's a good point, actually. I think that as a GM, if you're playing with a character who has a very high intelligence, it's important to do that for them because it helps make them feel smarter. Like, and it just works on a lot of different levels, like from a roleplay perspective, especially, right? So.
Oh man, you came in at 3rd edition, so you might not even have any experience with these guys. Because Serpentry has asked, how would you do a Kender race for 5e?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I have a little bit of experience with that. I have not played in a game personally with a Kender, but I played in like a West Marches style like big group game where one of the other players was a Kender. I know everyone hated adventuring with him because he was just like constantly getting them into trouble, but I feel like making a conversion to that for 5th edition wouldn't be super hard because most of their quirks are like personality driven things, right? So I don't know, you might have more experience with doing that than I would because you're right, that's from before.
Yeah, I feel like the stout halfling is almost already there. Like they have the lucky, they have they're lucky, they have, what else do they got going on for them? The brave, which kind of plays into the fact that Kender are fearless.
Yep.
So like they're almost there. You could really just reskin a halfling if you wanted to.
Yeah, they're like one step away from being a true Kender for sure.
I mean, you could give them immunity to fear, I guess. I don't think that would be too game breaking, and take something else away.
Yeah, a lot of the things that cause fear effects, like you're generally expected to at least have a chance to save. So immunity to fear, I don't think is a terrible game-breaking racial ability, considering the luck thing in general, like, that's so good, right? So you look at something like that, immune to fear isn't the end of the world.
And if you're in theory, if you're playing a Kender properly, you should be putting your character in all kinds of harmful situations, because that's kind of what they do. Like, if you look at the Kender race from Dragonlance, they probably shouldn't even exist.
No. No, the fact that they get through every day is a gift for a Kender. If you get to the end of that day, you did a good job. Like
it seems like an exceedingly old Kender should be like 20.
Like, the oldest Kender anyone's ever seen is 20 tops.
I think literally I read somewhere is it's like Kender will climb in a dragon's mouth to see what's in there.
Yeah, just check it out. It's like, oh, what's in here? And they're the person who drops like a spoon in a pot of boiling soup, and they just stick their hand in to get it back. Like, no care about anything, which is kind of great. But I understand why they have kind of a bad rap, because I can see that being disruptful to some parties for sure.
One of my favorite books early on was Kaz the Minotaur, and he traveled with a Kender, and I forget the name of it, but he was always telling him, take a breath, which was his nice way of telling him to shut up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when the Minotaur's fist is the size of your face.
You listen.
So Tristan wants to know, which do you do more often? Make a mission around a monster, or choose a monster to fit your mission?
I personally usually start with a creature that I think is cool and build around that. There are definitely times where it's like, okay, they're going through this mountain pass or whatever, what would be something that would live here? But a lot of the times when I'm planning out the world before I even get to that point, I'm like, I want to use this creature. Where would it live? In a mountain pass. So then I put that mountain pass in the world, you know what I mean? So that's generally how I start with that kind of stuff anyways.
Yeah, I feel like I've been like all over the place with that. So like we have an adventure up on our website that people can buy, Maze of Mandoon, that I wrote. And with that, it was like, well, the Beast of Mandoon is what I wanted to base the adventure around. Minotaurs are my favorite, one of my favorite monsters. And sometimes I'll do that, or maybe it'll be a story element, or maybe it'll be a location, or maybe it'll be something from one of the players' background. So I don't think I have like a regular way that I do those kinds of things.
Yeah, and I think it's good to have a mix of that, like, just to diversify how you make your encounters, for sure. I mean, honestly, in my games, a huge portion of my encounters are determined by a random encounter table, just because I think that's fun, and I can never decide what to put in one place. So I will just make tables based on regions that are in the world, and sometimes it works out really well, and other times it ends up being something kind of goofy, and it's like, why is this random swamp demon like just on the road from this town? And then, but that works though, because then I have to come up with the justification. I'm like, oh well, because this guy summoned him, and he has like a little cult going on in the woods, and then I haphazardly end up building more lore into my world because of the random encounter table.
So, do you build your random encounter tables? Are they truly random encounter tables, or are they based off of character level?
Well, a little bit of both, because so what I do when I make an encounter table is I will pick, say, the region. So in my current setting, there's a bunch of deserts. So I'm like, okay, the desert. This is what can be encountered in the desert. And I'll organize it kind of by CR thresholds. So it's just like 0 to 1, and then like 2 to 3, 4 to 5, 6 to 7, whatever. And if the characters roll an encounter, the way I do encounters is every day they roll a d12. If they roll 10 or less, it's nothing. If they roll an 11, then it's an encounter suitable for their level. So like a normal encounter. So if they're all average level 4, I'll roll on the 4 to 5 table. If they roll a 12, then it's on the next table up, which is then when you start to get into the tougher stuff. So every time they get an encounter, and it kind of works on a meta level, because the players know if it's something that they might want to consider running from, because as soon as that 12 shows up, everyone's like, oh no. And then I roll on the table in the level 5 party, it's like, oh, a Trent is coming. And they're like, yeah, we're going to just not deal with that. So that's generally how I've done encounters in the past, which kind of gives a mix you get that element of true randomness, but there's no chance that they're going to encounter like a Tarask or something if they're only like level 4. So it keeps it within reason. So if they do decide to stay and fight, they still have a chance, but it's not going to be easy.
I love random encounters tables that have monsters on there that don't give them a chance.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Well, and when you look at the tables too, I guess to get more into the way it works, is say I have 20 different monsters in the hard pool that they've rolled on. If they roll, I get them to roll a second time to determine what monster on the table it is. And if they roll the lowest value, so a 1, it goes down to the previous table, and then they roll again. But if they roll, say, a 20, it goes up to the next value, and then they roll again. So it's possible for them to roll, like, 2 tables ahead of where they are leveled to be. It's just very unlikely. But that has happened once, and we actually had 2 players die because of it in the last session. So I guess it's not as unlikely as I thought it would be. But
yeah, it can absolutely happen. I mean, we've played Open Legend where you have exploding dice, and we had the 20-sider explode 2 times. So 2 that means you've rolled 3 20s in a row.
yeah.
So it can happen. The odds are just very unlikely. So we got Cardboard Fortress in the house. I guess that's Anthony. What's up, brother? And he's like, why do people need to play this race in the game talking about Kender? And you know why? I'll tell you why. Because people just want an excuse to be an asshole sometimes. And I feel like most of the people that play Kenders just want to be annoying assholes. Not all, but a good portion of them. They want an excuse to like steal from the rest of the party and be annoying. And
oh yeah. Hashtag not all Kenders.
Yeah.
But for real, it's true. And that's why when it comes to some of the race options that are predisposed to have that potential to be a jerk, I am very careful with who I allow to do that. 99% of the time I'll say it's fine. But if it's a player I know what their motives are behind this, like, I'm going to use this to just get us murdered by trolls in session 1, I'm like, okay, maybe I'm not going to allow that in this game. But I kind of learned that lesson in my first ever game that I DM'd for, which I think every DM does this at some point, going back to 3.5. They had rules for if you wanted to play a monstrous creature, right? So you could play as any monster from the monster manual, and there were rules for that, like this is your level adjustment, and this is whatever. And one of my players wanted to play as a sea squid, but he wanted to be like a terrible abomination experiment that was like half sea squid, half man. And I was like, sure, why not? So he ended up as the sea squid who had like an intelligence of 4 or something, and he had a bunch of like tentacle attacks that he could use, and his level adjustment was like +5 or something like that. And I'm thankful that player, who was actually my first DM, so he knew exactly what he was doing, I'm thankful that he didn't abuse it as much as he could have. Whenever the party got in real trouble, he'd be like, all right, I'm going to use my psionic powers to set all my tentacles on fire, grapple this guy, and kill everything. But that only happened if the party was actually in trouble. So he didn't abuse it too much. But yeah, I definitely learned my lesson from seeing what he could do. I was like, man, if I gave this to the wrong person, I wouldn't know what to do because I didn't have the level of experience or confidence to be able to deal with that, right? So I'm just like, here's 6 goblins. That's a good encounter for a level 1 party. And he's like, murder.
He
like,
becomes a blender of tentacles.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, and it was fun. And we actually, like, I'm glad I did allow him to do that because we had some really funny moments come up in the campaign because of it. And Sebastian, the sea squid, is a character who will live on forever in the minds of our players and our friend group. But I definitely learned my lesson about allowing certain things in the game for sure.
Yeah, players can get a little zany at times, which
is fine. In the right game, I'm totally supportive of that, but it depends on the game, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and it adds so and it kind of speaks to what you said. Just speaks to the fact that it seems like the funniest moments tend to come from unexpected places. Yeah. Like you probably now have a bunch of stories about Sebastian the Sea Squid, that you wouldn't have had if you just said no.
Exactly. And like, it was funny. And he played it perfectly. I won't even try to do the voice because I'm horrible at accents, but he put on an accent which basically sounded like someone talking with a mouthful of water. And he did it like the entire time. And that campaign was like almost 2 years long. So props to him for doing that. and every time he spoke, it was hilarious. And I have this one distinct memory of them. They were in a trap. The room was kind of falling apart on them. Or no, sorry, the room was very rickety. They were in like this suspended box, and he started pulling up like floorboards to try to escape. And he wanted to roll knowledge of dungeoneering, which was a thing in 3.5, to see like which floorboards were safe for him to pull out. And he rolled a nat 1 on the dice, and he was like, which floorboards are important? I was like, none of the floorboards are important. And he was like, perfect, and just started ripping up floorboards. And then, of course, the group fell into the trap, and it was terrible. But we remember it more than some of the more epic moments that we had because of how ridiculous Sebastian the Sea Squid was.
That is absolutely my favorite thing, when players will metagame to their detriment.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And he was very good at that.
You know, because I guess we often talk about metagaming and the pitfalls of it and how it's horrible and you shouldn't do it. But when done well, it just can add to the game so much. And, you know, especially like I had one player at a con that we were at that was playing, and they were playing a bard. So they would constantly make bardic knowledge checks and fail them and then proceed to make things up. Which just makes it so much more fun.
Well, yeah, I love that, and that's like, because you're right, metagaming is like the big no-no, but I think if used properly and not used to take away from the overall story, I think metagaming can add value and be fun for sure, because that was the same, like this player in 3.5, and I guess it's the same in 5th edition, you can't roll knowledge on certain things unless you have proficiency in it, or in 3.5, like 1 rank in it, right? So he spent all of his skill points to take 1 rank in every possible knowledge that he could, just so that he could roll on it but be terrible at everything. So he never knew anything, but he would try to see what he would remember, and it often resulted in situations like that, which were pretty funny.
So Zarif Gaming, how would you go about making an anti-hero campaign and maintaining it as an anti-hero campaign? Everyone needs black trench coats.
Yeah, we have a joke about that in the current game, where we have an assassin character who is a very self-aware, like, broody kind of character. Like, she's not serious about it, and it's great because every time they go into a tavern, she's like, I look for the darkest, most brooding corner that I can go into, and I sit there and roll performance to act mysterious. Like, yeah, I want to give the bard a spell that's like darkness, except it's called brooding, where it just casts dim light in a 20-foot area. But to actually answer the question, I think to maintain an anti-hero game, it's important to make sure that they have a hero to be the antithesis to, if that makes any sense. Like, they can't be anti-heroes unless there's someone else actively trying to maybe do the same thing, but they're going about it in the proper good way, whereas your characters are playing as, like, the Suicide Squad, who's going to go in and just bust everything up and get things done the dirty way.
Yeah, it feels like if to me it feels like 90s comic books. Like that's kind of what you're talking about, because like it was just that period where like all the heroes they came out with, you know, or the teams they came out with were just heroes. You know, I think they dubbed that like the Iron Age of comics. When you had a lot of that. You know, I think it's one of those things, like, anti-heroes done sparingly can be fun and can be cool, but it's also, it can get old really quick and be overdone. And I also feel like a lot of, like, we see a lot of it with, like, tieflings and warlocks in 5e, and it's just like it screams to that, I'm so goth, you know,
totally
character. So it's far more interesting to figure out how can you do those things and do the opposite.
Yeah, what I find most interesting is when people make those characters, but rather than get further into it, try to come up with a way for their character to become less that way and more accepting of others, and like actually make friends and grow as a person rather than just remain as the dark brooding anti-hero. Because it's fun for sure, but you're right, it definitely gets old after enough time where everyone's like, okay, we get it, like, you don't care, the law's in your hands, we understand.
Yeah, that's why I think a party like that wouldn't be really that much fun to play. Like, you think of Strider from Lord of the Rings. You know, how his character evolved and developed, and he starts off kind of like that dark and brooding character, You know, and then kind of like progresses from there.
And then he learns to love. He learns to have friends. He learns to care, and he finally fulfills his destiny. Spoiler for Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
One person out there who hasn't seen it, but yeah, that's exactly it. Like, I think that's what can make those characters. It elevates them, I guess, to something that's fun for everyone to kind of be party to.
So, you know, we were talking about this a little bit off air, so I'll just mention it, guys, so you can go find it and check it out. And that is Lasers and Liches. Just Google that. Like, the art is fantastic, especially Cardboard Fortress. I think that our art is going to speak to you. They did a Cardboard Fortress are friends of ours. They're in one of our games, and they did a game called Laser Riders, and it's basically Tron light cycles. Oh, wait a minute. It's not that far away. And
always keep it close at hand.
Yeah, and you know it's got this like fantastic
oh, man.
80s style, right?
Love that artwork.
Yeah, and the way the box is
like
set up.
VHS box, that's perfect.
Yeah, you can find it on Amazon and ThinkGeek and a bunch of places. They're featured on Geek and Sundry. But it's a really fun game that has a lot of like replay value, and it's kind of like simplistic, which is what I like for my tabletop games anymore.
Yeah.
And I like games that end. Like I don't like. I'm past that point where I want to play a game that's just going to go on and on and on.
Totally, I 100% empathize with that because that's what I play D&D for, and I love it. But I am very weary of getting into a new game that's going to take me a ton of time to learn, and then it's like, okay, we're going to be playing this for another 6 months for that exact reason. It's not that I'm not interested, but you just don't have the time, right? Like, you only have so much time, and D&D is already such a huge...
Yeah, so I guess when I go to tabletops, I want like the opposite of that. You know, give me Quarriors or give me Smash Up, something I can jump in and play a bunch of games of, instead of like one game that's going to be like this epic 6-hour event.
Totally. And I mean, Smash Ups is great for that you mentioned it. Smash Ups is so fun. I played that for the first time just a few months ago, and I was like, this is incredible. Why have I never played this before? It's really good.
I just like trying to figure out what ridiculous combinations I can do. And I know some people, you know, look and go, oh, what is this deck good at? And I look at it and go, what would be crazy? I know, space dinosaurs or, you know, or pirate ninjas or whatever.
Pirate Ninjas was the first one I ever played as. I was like, definitely going Ninja Pirates, and it was fantastic. It was so super fun. And we did like Ghost Aliens at one point too. Like,
yeah.
I love that game just for the flavor alone, and the game itself actually happens to be fun too, which is great. So.
I will say I like putting aliens with different things, because when you put space in front of anything, it just makes it cooler. But it just so happens that it is also a strong deck. But but you know, I just like, you know, like you said, Space Ghosts, and you're like, it reminds me of my childhood.
Yeah, exactly.
Tang Yang wants to know, how can you handle homebrew spells that players are trying to use in your campaign? If they're challenging you and giving you a problem, you can just not allow them, or you can ask them what is it they're trying to do that you can't do with the spells that are already out there, and can you find something that's close to what they want to do and tweak it, is kind of what I would do.
I think that's a really important and good point for where to start when someone brings something like that to you. Because you're right, there's a ton of spells out there, and chances are there's probably some spell or combination of spells that, if tweaked a little bit, will be able to do what they want. And I guess with any changes, whether it's just a tweak or if you are actually like creating a new spell, it's important to just set the precedent that, like, okay, we're going to go with this, but if I find it ends up being disruptive or above and beyond anything else in the game, then we might change it later, because that can happen. There are simple things that might not seem that bad, but then when you actually play with it, you discover that it actually is quite powerful.
I also find like there's two different types of players when you're playing the game, and that want something that isn't there. One is they legitimately just want to do something different, and they're interested in either role playing or a different story element, or the other is they're just seeking some kind of mechanical advantage. The former I will work with. The latter I'm probably going to dismiss offhand fairly quickly.
100%. Because the intentions of the player makes a huge difference. Because if you want to add to the game and make it like more exciting and have some new magic, I'm 100% on board with that. But if you're just trying to power creep your character, that doesn't really add anything or any value to the game, right? So
let's shift gears a little bit and move away from the questions, but they're coming quite steadily, guys, which I appreciate. Whether you're watching on Facebook, Twitch, or YouTube's, on your channel, one of your features is Monster of the Week. So, do you have a method for coming up with your Monsters of the Week?
Yeah, well, so Monsters of the Week, I guess, for anyone who doesn't know, I basically take a monster from an older edition of Dungeons & Dragons or some other tabletop game and just make a stat block and port it into 5th edition and then do a little blurb about it, like what it does and how you can use it in your game. And my method for that, generally there are 2 different methods I have. One of them is if it's a creature I know about that I've used in the past that I really like, and I'm like the first one I did, the Destro Chain, I was like, oh, this is super cool. People should know about this in 5th edition. So that will be kind of my jumping off point, right? The other breed of monsters that come from there are like I'm just reading through the Fiend Folio or the Monster Manual or whatever, and I see something I'm like, oh, that's really cool and weird. Why is this not in 5th edition? And then I'll kind of take it and work on it to make it something viable for 5e. So those are kind of the 2 different ways that I discover monsters anyways.
So, speaking of that, what is that you got over your shoulder there sitting on the table?
Oh, this, in fact, is a Fiend Folio in all its glory. The AD&D 1st edition Fiend Folio. This was sent to me by one of my lovely patrons because I pull monsters from this so much, and I was using a PDF version for the DM's Guild, and it's much nicer to have a physical copy, so I just have this handy at all times to make sure that whenever I'm just waiting for something to download or render or whatever, got weird monsters to look at.
There's I've always said, like, I feel like most of the terrible D&D monsters came from that book for some reason.
Yeah.
And then we got really weird things out of there, like the flail snail.
The flail snail is hilarious, and I am shocked that it was reprinted in Volo's Guide to Monsters, but at the same time, when I saw it, I couldn't help but smile, because I was like, first, why? But, I mean, sure, why not? Like, it's a flail snail, what are you gonna do?
I love the fact that they brought back the flail snail. I actually used it in my Spelljammer game.
Oh, yeah.
And they were being attacked by a ship of Skrull. And it was basically like a giant space kraken that they were riding, but it was dormant, and the tentacles would kind of like would get used as catapults, and they were catapulting flail snails onto the other ship and using them as catapult balls.
Oh, that's incredible. That's such a good use of flail snails.
And the flail snail itself wasn't that much of a threat to the party because they're a higher level. But they were a huge threat to the crew. So.
Yeah, I bet. And that's what I love about a lot of monsters in the Fiend Folio have this, like, weird quality to them where you just look at it and you're just like, okay. Like, you take a step back, you're like, what am I looking at? What's going on here? And then you read about it and you're like, okay, I understand where they're coming from. But just the initial artwork is so funny. Well, I recently did a video on a monster from there just a couple weeks ago, the Tween, which is a monster found from there, which is basically just a ghost that possesses someone against their will and augments them in some ways. It's like a symbiotic relationship. It gives them some powers, and it allows them to roll. It's funny, actually, in the Fiend Folio, it says they roll with 2 d20s, and they use the most advantageous of the 2 rolls, which kind of made me laugh. I was like, oh yeah, so maybe that's advantage, but like many years ago. But it also imposes disadvantage on the rest of your party, so it's like, oh, this is an interesting monster. And my adaptation ended up very different from that, but people seem to really like that one, and now we're in the process, like as a community project on the Discord channel, we're in the process of turning the Tween, which we ended up renaming the Gravewalker, because Tween is probably the most hilarious name it could have had. We're in the process of turning that monster actually into either a subclass for the Warlock, or just a brand new class altogether. The subclass idea being you make a pact with this like ghost who your patron lives inside of you basically, and is able to grant you extra powers and that kind of stuff. So we've been having a lot of fun working on that. But that's the thing, is like those old books are great for ideas inspiring. Even if a monster isn't like, oh, I can easily port this, a lot of the times I'll find stuff that I think is neat, and I will take that and put it in a different monster that I'm working on.
The tween, was that like, it was like a warrior with standing there with his hands on the pommel of the sword, and then the fuzzy one version next to him?
That's exactly what it is. Yep, it's the guy standing there, the very Conan-looking barbarian type, and he's got just like a cloud beside him.
Yeah, I have a terrible memory, but certain things, it's weird, the things that I do remember.
Yeah, of all the things you were going to remember today, the tween from the Fiend Folio.
That picture, popped in my head, so yeah.
Awesome.
Oh, at Cardboard Fortress kind of way in, he's talking to our chief and Nerdarchy, Doug. You and everyone else want to create Laser Rider characters and mutants and masterminds. That could be kind of fun. I could be down with doing that. I think you should run that game, Anthony. Would be great. So, what kind of gameplay style do you guys enjoy? Your group?
Well, I'm currently playing or DMing, I should say, for two groups. One of them is, like I said, the one I DM for. The other one is when we kind of switch off. The game that I DM for, the playstyle changes mostly from campaign to campaign. Like the first campaign I ran in the world that this setting takes place in was a very like atypical fantasy setting, and I kind of softballed the players, and it was very much like, here we go, we have to stop the evil lich, and that was great. And that was just a very easy to play kind of play style. That party, despite that though, that party ended up failing in stopping the lich from summoning this ancient god, and the world was completely annihilated. So the current setting I'm playing in now is like a post-apocalyptic version of that past world, like 500 years down the line, and it's very brutal. It's I don't want to say unforgiving because it's never completely unfair, but it's a harsher style of DMing, which my players are on board with. I explained this to them at the beginning, like resources are going to be scarce, magic items, you're basically going to be relying on delving into ancient ruins from the old world to find things, because a lot of people in the current world don't have the capacity to create these powerful magic items. It's very much like Dark Sun, I guess, if I was to summarize it. I've drawn a lot of inspiration from Dark Sun in the terms of how society is handled and what the world itself is like. And yeah, that's kind of the playstyle that we're running right now, which I'm enjoying.
Now, are all your games in person?
All the ones I'm doing right now, yes. The two games that I'm running right now are both in person. We just finished up actually a Roll20 game not too long ago, but yeah, right now I'm playing completely in person.
Yeah, we do kind of a mix. We tend to get in at least 2 games a month in person. For a while, we're doing a solid 3 games a month in person, and then we do a bunch of stuff online as well.
It's hard to make that happen because, like, well, that's always the joke, is like everyone's willing to play, but no one's availability is going to match up. It's like, oh, I'm free on Monday, I'm free on Wednesday, like,
yeah,
whatever. But I just happen to be very fortunate in the sense that the place I live, Halifax, Nova Scotia, is a relatively small town. I mean, it's the biggest town in the east coast of Canada, but that's relatively small compared to a lot of places in the rest of the world. So everyone who I play D&D with lives within, like, a 5-minute drive or like a 50-minute bus ride, so we're able to make it work, and definitely lucked out there. But there are totally times where it's like snowing, or we have a player who's like away for a few weeks somewhere else, that they just become a head on a laptop screen. But
how big is Nova Scotia?
Nova Scotia is not the biggest. If you were to look at a map, it is the tiny little splint of land that's on the far right-hand side or eastern side of Canada. It's the biggest city, like I said, in the East Coast, but that doesn't say a whole lot.
So, how far are you from Prince Edward Island?
Oh, Prince Edward Island, yeah, that's about a 4-hour drive from where I live.
So it's not super close.
It's not super close, but if you need to get there in a day, you could do it.
Yeah. We have a friend out that way. So I was just wondering.
Another friend on the East Coast. Yeah, we're generally a friendly bunch over here. There's a huge, like, nerdy kind of tabletop uprising happening right now. Like, we have all these events. Just a couple weeks ago, I saw there's this like bar close to where I live that was like having a Dungeons and Flagons event. Like, come down and pay $10 and you get a beer and we're gonna play D&D. And I'm like, this is awesome. Like, it doesn't even feel real. I was like, it's a nerd's paradise over here in Halifax.
I mean, that's a great idea. We have Drinks and Dragons in Philadelphia, I live just outside of Philadelphia, which is pretty cool. And there's definitely these things popping up, and it's that, it's an in thing, to play D&D now. I can't believe it, coming from the era that I did. It's crazy. Cardboard Fortress wants to know, rock grubs, condition, trap, or monster? What do you think?
For rot grubs?
Yeah.
I mean, all.
Yeah.
Is the short answer to that question.
And the even shorter answer to that question is your GM's an asshole.
Yeah, that is the long and short of it. If your GM subjects you to rot grubs, consider finding a new GM. Just joking, of course. But, yeah, I don't know. I think they could work in any way, which is kind of the fundamental hatred of rot grubs. That's where that comes from.
Now,
where they're going to show up.
Now my mind is reeling with all the different monsters. Like, you had rock grubs. Thought Eater, wasn't that the platypus?
Oh, yeah.
The psychic platypus. But I feel like there was another one that was like a mole that would, like, burrow through the ground, and like adventurers would like be sleeping on the ground, and they would burrow under you and begin eating your thoughts or something. Like, I don't know if that was the Thought Eater or if it was something different. And I feel like there was other monsters like, kind of like the rock grub as well, like an earworm or something like that.
Yeah, or like the Mind Flayers type of version of that too. That's basically the like worm from Star Trek that like burrows into your ear and takes over, kind of thing. I can't remember what those are called, but there's a whole section about them in Volo's Guide to Monsters I remember reading about and being disgusted by. But
Volo's Guide to Monsters is so good. Like, the lore section is so good.
Yeah, they definitely pulled a lot of things from there, and I actually used the giant section not too long ago in a past session. They killed a giant. I think it was a Fomorian. And they're like, oh, what's in his bag? And I was like, I don't know. Let me pull up this book. I'm like, contents of a giant's bag. And I was like, there's like a live pig. There's this. Yeah. Like all the crazy stuff that you can find in there. And it's cool. Like, it's a fantastic book for sure. I hope they do more supplements like Volo's Guide. And like, I mean, Xanathar's Guide to Everything was obviously really exciting, but that was more like tables and stuff, which was great for its purpose, but I mean in terms of monster manuals, I hope they do more stuff like Volo's Guide where they really like dig into certain monsters, because it was neat. It was a fun read. Yeah,
I really enjoyed it. It's probably my favorite book they've put out thus far.
Yeah.
And it was clever because they put just enough in there for a player to go, maybe I want to buy this, even if you're never going to run the game. Yeah, you're just getting that. You're just buying it for like those 10 pages or whatever.
Totally, and all the like the racial stuff, which was cool.
But but that being said, Xanathar's Guide was like record breaking because it was.
Xanathar's Guide was a whole other thing. We like a couple weeks after that came out. This was around Christmas time, I think, or the beginning of December. We had a session where a bunch of our players couldn't make it because they were away for the holidays and stuff. So it was me and just 3 other people, which turned into 4 other people. And we took Xanathar's Guide and we just rolled up 4 characters for them, completely randomized. Like, random race, random class, all random stats, put in random places. And we're like, we're just going to do this one shot with all these crazy characters. And it was super fun because it's shocking to me how all these random things, you just have the template and then your brain's like, oh, this is because of this, and like they only have one parent because their other parent was killed in a terrible luchador accident or whatever, and you're just like you just build this character from essentially nothing, and everyone ended up with these super wacky but believable PCs that after we were done, they were like, that was fun. Can we play with these characters again? And I was like, well, we'll keep the sheets, and next time we need to do another one shot, maybe we'll bust them out. So I think there's a lot of value in that book for sure.
Did you say killed in a leap? God, my friggin' mouth cannot pronounce the words my brain wants to spit out. Leaper. What was the word you said?
Luchador accident.
Yeah. Help me out here.
Yeah, they. one of the characters, I'm trying to remember everything about him, but he ended up as like, he had one parent, and his parent was killed because of like their trade accident or something, and his character was like a barbarian brawler type who was like a pit fighter, and he learned his skills like from one of his parents, and then it was like, oh, maybe his dad died in like the wrestling ring, and he had like a fatal luchador accident, and that's why he became a luchador and like took over the mantle and like grabbed his dad's mask. I was like, this is hilarious. That's something I would never think of, but just the clues are all there and you put it together, and it was great. And it would be crazy stuff like that for all the characters, and it forced a lot of them to not only play character classes that they weren't familiar with. Like, we had people who were only playing fighters and stuff who are now like, oh, I'm a wizard with like 2 strength, cool. But it forced everyone kind of out of their comfort zones, which ended up being a lot of fun, because at first no one knew what they were doing, and then as they grew into it, they're like, I think I like playing as a wizard, or I think I like playing as a barbarian, or whatever, and it's cool. It's just a fun way to get that experience that you wouldn't normally think you'd even want to have.
Yeah, I love that stuff. One of the last Mutants and Masterminds games I ran, I had a mystical luchador mask that that I had these two supervillains that are like tearing up the city. The guy in the luchador mask just wanted to fight people and prove that he was the best fighter, and then the other character's name was Munch, and it was a sumo wrestler. His power was like to eat anything, and then he had the ability to turn whatever he ate into projectiles and just spit it out. I had so much fun playing a Supers game. Anthony, I might just have to, after we finish up this 5e game, I might just have to do a Mutants and Masterminds game. But I just like to, and I don't run anything. I don't want any canon. I don't want any existing universes. I don't want to play Marvel, DC, Image. I want to do my own thing, and it's going to be ridiculous. Just know. They finally beat that character and demask him, and they realize it's like a 13-year-old boy. That the mask gives him super steroids.
As those magical artifacts tend to do.
Yeah. I mean, fucking role-playing games are just awesome. Like, there is no better way that one could spend their time.
I agree, and like you learn a lot about yourself and the people you play with when you get into role-playing games too, for sure. Like, it's something that, it's an experience unlike anything else I think I've ever done before.
So, what is your upload schedule over on Dungeon Dad?
Well, on a good week, I try to put out at least 2 videos a week. Usually Mondays is either campaign diaries, or if I don't have enough campaign material to talk about for more than 10 minutes, I will do something like DM tips or player tips, that kind of thing. Just something that I feel like talking about. And then on Thursdays is usually when Monster of the Week comes out. So that would be today.
So are you all D&D all the time, or do you venture off into other role-playing games?
No, I try to engage in as many role-playing games as I am afforded the opportunity to play in, because I think that having different perspectives on role-playing games and getting new ideas that I can borrow from other role-playing games is great. It's a great asset for any DM. But primarily what I've been playing lately, actually, is I got the Dark Souls board game for Christmas, and a group of mine, we sat down after playing D&D and we were like, let's figure out how to play this game. So we spent a couple hours reading through the rules. We were like, okay, I think we get it. And then we played it for like an hour and had a ton of fun. So then every second week, like the off weekend that we haven't been playing D&D, we've been getting together to play Dark Souls. And it's been incredible. I love that board game. It is super fun, and it challenges you in ways that you would not believe. It's not easy, but I mean, you look at the source material and it's like, of course, it's Dark Souls. It's not meant to be easy. But yeah, it's a really cool cooperative role-playing game. It forces you to work together, because if one of you dies, you all die. The game's over. So, and you share experience, so you level up as a unit. Like, you choose who levels up at what time. And your initial reaction is like, oh, I'm not leveling up, I don't get any cool stuff. But then that doesn't matter as much when the person playing the knight can cut in and take a huge hit for you that would have killed you otherwise. So it's cool. It's a different kind of tabletop game. Plus the miniatures are super nice. So
we used to, well, I shouldn't say we. Ted used to do a tabletop night once a month at his house. And, he's an extensive collector of pretty much anything and everything involving paper, plastic, or cardboard.
Yeah.
So he has tons of games, and he also encourages people to bring their own. So at any given point in time, there could be 4 to 6 games going on throughout the house because he would just invite like everybody he knew, and
Awesome.
he's got a full size pool table in the basement that we use for gaming that is actually converted into a table, so it's got table space. So you got this 4x8 section and a nice sized dining room table, and and then in his family room, so games would just be going on all over the place.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. That's a super good idea, actually. And we unfortunately don't have any friends who have that amount of tabletop games to bust out. But that's the kind of person you want to be friends with. We do have a boardroom. The boardroom cafe is what it's called. It's kind of that idea, but it's like a place that you can go to. That basically, I mean, those things have been popping up all over the place. But board game cafes are great for that, and that's how I've experienced a lot of role playing games that I don't own or I don't know anyone who owns. And I mean, yeah, it's great. Like if you can get out there, the more role playing games you can subject yourself to, the better.
Yeah. Oh, sadly, that went away as soon as he had kids. Remember, folks,
Yeah.
PSA: kids wreck your life. They're a drain on your resources and they wreck your life. That being said, I have a couple. So, but now let's get to the fun stage where I actually get to play games with them. So
Totally.
it does get better. It just takes like 15 years. You have to play the long game.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah, I've always said, I was like, if I have kids, they 100% will be subject to role-playing games. I'll just be like, okay, I have this crazy monster I need to test out. Who wants to roll up some characters? But
What is your favorite? What is your favorite non D&D game? RPG.
that's a tough one. I mean, that changes a lot, as I'm sure it does for everyone, depending on. Right now, I would definitely say I think actually the Dark Souls game because we're having so much fun with it and it's so new. Trying to think. Overall, Call of Cthulhu is one that we go back to pretty frequently, and I mean, the classic, which I think it was my introduction into like tabletop games on a slightly more serious level that everyone has a story about, is Risk. And me and my friends will play a game of Risk usually every couple months, and it always just devolves into everyone hating each other by the end of the night. But that's why we do it, is to remind each other of what horrible people we can be to one another when we get upset. So it's yeah, I don't know. I tend to gravitate to the strategy-driven games for sure when I'm not playing D&D, which would be Risk or Dark Souls for sure.
But when we had a more steady third DM, that's what our third in-person game usually would be just something else. Well, we've done Gamma World, Cypher System, Star Wars. So it was just nice to have, especially for a while we had a GM that would come in and he was just had an eclectic knowledge of other RPGs. I was always amazed at like how fast he could, take a new game and read it and be ready to run it. And like for us, that's the best. Like just like, all right, just we just have to figure out how to make a character, and then we can show up and we we'll learn to play as we go, and just hit the ground running.
Totally. It's great when you have that person who just understands everything fundamentally. It's like, all right, here's how this works, and you just go from there. And I guess that's kind of why I've been trying to play more RPGs lately, is just so, because you want to be that person, right? You want to be the person who can just sit down and be like, oh, we're playing Arkham Horror, cool, I know all the rules for that, let's go.
Yeah, I really struggle with getting through reading rule books nowadays. I keep saying, I've half read the Dresden Fate core book, and it's written really well for an RPG in the sense that it's kind of entertaining to read, but it's still a big freaking book, and at some point I just stopped reading.
Yeah, for sure.
So
I do that a lot with D&D modules.
Yeah, I used to read all the time. Now I'm terrible. I have to make myself read more. So we're up on the hour mark. As always, it goes by really fast.
Oh, wow.
In the description, you guys can all find Dungeon Dad's socials, his YouTube channel. Go check him out. Show him some love. He's got some great content over there. It was fun having you on. I appreciate everyone hanging out with us and watching today. And, thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a lot of fun, and it was good chatting with you and the audience.
And the audience. Yeah, so until next time, guys, stay nerdy.